this goes tumbling down. So don't do any. Want to keep your readers on the edge of their seats? Get your characters in trouble. Stick around and find out how. Welcome to Word Wizards, a series where you'll discover the magic of writing. I'm Marty Chan, a kids author, storyteller, and word wizard. I'm going to share with you my secrets to become a word wizard just like me. Now, there are two things that every writer needs to have. The first thing is a healthy sense of curiosity. You want to be able to notice the things that no one else pays attention to. The second thing you need is the confidence to take the things that only you notice and make them visible for everyone else. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Now, some of you may have noticed the little thing that was floating right about here. Now, for those of you who can't see it, just wait. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that thing visible for all of you to see. Now, that's what a word wizard does. They take what we don't notice and turn them into things we can't live without. Now, I can't teach you how to be curious. You only have to keep your eyes and ears open and pay attention to the things that no one else wants to see. But I can give you the confidence to turn those things visible by sharing with you my tips, tricks, and tools to becoming better writers. Let's figure out how to do that. Now, before I share with you my writing tips, let me share with you a quick story, a scenario that some of you may have seen, hopefully none of you have experienced. Let's say you're sitting in class and you're doing your work, pretty much focused. Next thing you know, the classroom door swings wide open and the principal barges in. She stabs a finger in your direction. And for a second, your heart skips a beat and you're wondering, why is the principal pointing at me? You start to get up out of your desk and the principal shakes her head and points at the kid right behind you. You sit down relieved while the other kid gets up and shambles toward the principal. They walk out of the classroom, the door slams shut behind them, and suddenly everyone wants to know what that kid did to be called out of class in the middle of the day. They start to whisper rumors about what the kid did. Maybe they broke a school window. Maybe they smashed their bike into the principal's car. Maybe they robbed a bank. Well, maybe they didn't rob a bank. That's a little outrageous. But you know that that kid is in some kind of trouble, and you want to know what that trouble is. That's the thing about people. When we see others in trouble, we're instantly curious, which is weird because in real life, we're always trying to stay out of trouble. But when someone else gets in trouble, we're fascinated. If you're sitting in a car and you pass by an accident, notice how every car seems to slow down and every person in a car looks at the accident and wonders what happened. Now, why do people do that? I think part of it is we're fascinated with how people get in trouble, but we also want to know how they get out of trouble, and we don't want to deal with the mess ourselves. We just want to see how other people do it. Now, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. When I watch a movie, the scene that I can't look at but I have to watch is when somebody's trying to steal something. Now, I can't turn off the scene. I have to know what happens, and I watch through my fingers wondering if that person's going to get away with what they're going to steal or if they're going to get caught. Now, if you know that people are fascinated when others get in trouble, that gives you a little clue about what you need to do in your stories. In fact, creating trouble, or what writers call conflict, makes the meat of your story, the middle of your story is where all the exciting trouble or conflict happens. So if you want us to follow your story, here's a simple way to do it. Think about the worst thing that could happen to your character and then make it happen. So for example, if somebody's doing stunts on a bike, worst thing that could happen, they wipe out. Or if you've got a character sitting on a plane, worst thing that could happen, so think about the worst things that could happen and you'll always create conflict in your story. Now, let's say you don't want every single story you write to have an asteroid crashing into the Earth. How do you create conflict then? Well, I'm going to share with you my writing secret, my word wizard secret on how to create conflict. It's a little cheat code that I use. If you know what a cheat code does in video games, you'll know that it makes it easier to play the game. In the same way, this cheat code is going to make it easier for you to create conflict in your story. And all you need to know is how to wow your reader. Now, wow stands for the 3 basic things you need to think about when you're creating conflict in your story. The first W in wow stands for what does your character want? Think about it as their goal or their mission or their objective. When you know what the character wants, it helps create a direction for the story. You could want something from a friend. You could want somebody to do something for you. You might need to get to a certain destination. If we know what your character wants, then you've got the beginning of conflict. The O in WOW stands for the thing that creates the conflict, obstacles. Something or someone that keeps your character from getting what they want. Now, there are many different kinds of obstacles that you can create in your story. There are 3 major categories of obstacles that you can choose from, and I'm going to share them with you now. Now, the first major category of obstacles is the one that most of us are familiar with: person versus person. If you've ever argued with an older brother or sister, you know what kind of conflict comes from that. Or maybe you get in trouble with a teacher, a parent, or a guardian. That's person versus person conflict. So when you think about that kind of obstacle, you can have good versus evil, like Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker. You could have a hero versus a villain. And you might even take it into the world of romance with a love triangle. You know, a love triangle where 2 people like another person and they're competing for that person's heart. And that one person has to decide between one of 2 people. The other kind of obstacle you can have is person versus nature. Now, this goes all the way back to the times of Greek philosophers when they were talking about stories and conflict. When they were thinking about person versus nature, they were thinking about natural weather occurrences. Maybe there was an earthquake. Maybe there was a hurricane. Maybe there was a tidal wave. They thought it has to be person versus the natural elements. Now, that's all fine and dandy if you're writing a disaster story. But let's say you're writing a family drama. You can't really have a volcano erupt in the middle of a family dinner. So what kind of conflict can you create from there if it's not a natural disaster? Well, think about nature as being objects or things. The perfect place to look for person versus nature kind of obstacles is a scary movie. If you've watched a scary movie, you've seen all sorts of examples of person versus nature. Maybe your victim trips on a twig in the middle of a field. Maybe they try to jump into the car and they try to start the car, but they've lost their keys. Or they do have their keys, but the car won't start. Think about all those different examples from scary movies, and you'll come up with all sorts of different obstacles that are person versus nature. One more kind of obstacle you can create, and it's the one that has the most emotion to it. It's person versus self. And what that means is there may be something within you that makes it hard for you to accomplish your objective. Maybe you're super shy and you can't talk to somebody. Or maybe you're really proud and you don't want to ask for help. Or sometimes it might be just a decision you have to make, an internal struggle where, you've got an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other, and they're both whispering in your ears about what you should do. A perfect example of person versus self usually happens around New Year's Eve. That's when a lot of grown-ups make resolutions to often be healthier and lose weight. And they show up at the gym in January and they hit the treadmill, they do weights, they work out on the elliptical, and they try really hard. They sweat up the place, and boy, does it stink. But usually around the middle of February, a lot of those people disappear because they've given up. They've lacked the motivation to continue. And what usually happens is next New Year's Eve, they make the exact same resolution to lose weight. So think about person versus self as a way to build up some great internal conflict. Now keep that in mind. You got 3 different categories of obstacles you can create: person versus person, person versus nature, and person versus self. Any one of those are going to create great conflict in your story. But wait, there is one more part of the cheat code. In WOW, we have the second W, which is, why is your character going after their objective? We need to know the reason they're going after everything so that we can care about what's going on, and we can decide if we want to cheer for your hero or if we want to put the book down. When you come up with the reason why your character is going after their objective, we can wrap our minds around what they're doing and we can relate to them. If we can start to identify with your main character, then not only does that character seem like our friend, sometimes they might even seem like us. We can put ourselves in the shoes of your main character and cheer for them. For example, in sports, if you watch the Olympics or the Stanley Cup or a football match, usually what happens is the sports reporters will focus on an athlete and tell their story, right? It might be a struggle of how they had to overcome all sorts of obstacles in their personal life to become the athlete they are now. When they win, we cheer all the more because it almost feels like our victory because we felt that we were just like that athlete. When you come up with the why, it makes us care more about what's happening in the story. So keep those 3 things in mind with the cheat code for conflict. What does your character want? The obstacles in the way, and why are they after their goal? Now keep that in mind. You can take any ordinary situation and turn it into a great story with conflict. For example, let's say you're in Calgary, Alberta, a city I love to visit often, and let's say you have to cross a street. Now, if it's a quiet street, it's fine. You can find a crosswalk and get across. But let's create some obstacles. Maybe there is no crosswalk, or maybe it's a really busy street, or maybe it's rush hour traffic. Now, what you're doing is you're creating more obstacles in the story. In fact, always aim for at least 3 obstacles in a story, and that will create a really cool middle. But the important thing to keep in mind is that each obstacle has to create more challenges than the one before it. Maybe it complicates things, maybe it raises the danger level, or maybe there's more emotional risk for the character involved. By raising the stakes, it makes the story far more interesting, and it's something that creates conflict. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to put that into action. I like to finish every video off with a story prompt or a writing prompt. That's basically where I'm going to give you a story starter, and you're going to try to take all the tips I talked about and put them into action. So take a look at this video right here. So you've got a guy running. What you need to figure out is, what is he running from and how is he going to get away from it? And what kind of obstacles can you throw in the way that will make it hard for him to escape? Put that into action and you'll come up with a really cool story. All right, I want to finish off with one last tip for you, and that's a reminder of how you want to raise the stakes. Remember what I said earlier, get your characters in trouble. In fact, let me show you what I'm talking about. I've got here a deck of cards, and maybe I want to spin the deck on my finger, kind of like a basketball. So there's a little bit of risk involved, and we'll see how it goes. Ooh. So I'm able to spin the deck, and you're thinking, oh yeah, that's not bad, but can you raise the stakes a little bit? So, all right, so maybe what I'll do is I'll go into the deck, and I'll pull out one card from the deck, okay? So one card from the deck that I will attempt to spin on one finger. And here we go. That's pretty cool, right? Except it's just one card. If it falls, all I have to do is bend over and pick up the one card and try it again. So if we want to raise the stakes, what we want to do is we want to spin all the cards. So what I would do is I take all the cards out of the box, because when they're out of the box, they can fly pretty much everywhere. So we would be playing a little game called 52 Pickup. And so there's a little bit of risk now. And I'm hoping that this works. And you're all sitting there going, yeah, we hope it works. Well, some of you are. Others of you are probably going, yeah, we want to see him play 52 Pickup. All right, here we go. So when you have a little bit of risk, it makes the reader interested in seeing what's going on. So with your stories, always remember, think about the worst thing that can happen and then make it happen so that the reader stays interested in your stories from the beginning to the middle to the end.